Thanks. Yeah, well, just to say that, look,
10 minutes.
Yeah, I'll probably be less than that. I'll be less than that. Look, the Commission on Taxation and Welfare deserve great credit for the work they did, the extensive work they did in producing their own report, which is a huge piece of work. And similarly, our committee has put a fair bit of work and thought into producing the report. I don't, given the volume of recommendations that are involved, I certainly don't support many of those recommendations in the Commission's own report, and quite honestly I don't agree with some of the recommendations our committee has made, but it's a cross-party committee and there's lots of different points of view on it. But I think nonetheless it is very important to thrash these things out, to have suggestions made, because we do have to have a long-term strategic view about how we finance our country. And although some people would accuse people before profit of being, you know, flahoolach or whatever, or populist, I actually would argue that we're very prudent in that we try, every year when we produce our budget, although we do have very far-reaching proposals for additional expenditure in public services and pensions and health and housing, that we always balance that by ways to pay for it, usually in our case focusing on the question of the concentrations of wealth in the hands of the corporate sector and the very wealthy in our society. And I welcome the fact that our report and the Commission do focus on the need for tax equity and for a taxation system that certainly looks at capital and wealth taxes. And I'm sure there's a lot of controversy, and there was certainly controversy. In fact, if you've mentioned wealth taxes to someone on our committee, they had near conniptions to even suggest such a thing. We strongly advocate there should be wealth taxes, but I think one of the things that I am very keen on in our recommendations, and the Minister alluded to, is to examine tax expenditures. And I think looking at, because they are in effect a shadow budget. It's the budget that doesn't really get discussed. So when we have the budget on budget day, if there's some new tax measures and then expenditure measures, we hear about them. What we don't hear about are tax breaks of one sort or another that have rolled on for years and years and years to benefit sometimes very good things in society. You know, like the tax-free allowance that ordinary workers might get, for example. But other of these tax expenditures are to particular sectors where there needs to be an ongoing scrutiny of whether these very, very large volumes of money are actually doing anything beneficial for our society, or, as I might feel in some cases, just lining the pockets of particular sectoral interests. And that's why, for example, our committee undertook a serious examination of the film tax credit to see, is this large amount of money, about €100 million a year, is it the best way to fund the production of film, to guarantee we have decent quality employment for training and conditions of employment for workers, and to contribute to the film culture of the country. And we examined that in detail. And I won't go into the detail of it now, other than to say some of us feel there's a very serious question as to whether the way it is structured is actually guaranteeing the sort of quality employment and training for the people who work in that industry, or if it's even creating an industry, or if it's just creating a sort of series of pop-up shops for individual films where workers have no real recognition of their service in the industry, don't have conditions of employment and so on. So we need to look at these things and we need to evaluate, is that, because of course we all want to fund the film industry, but might it be better to do it through direct expenditure? And in fact it's topical when you think about the RTE thing at the moment, because RT is a form of direct expenditure in culture and the audiovisual sector. The jobs are decent jobs. Some people were paid way too much at the top. There was malgovernance and all the rest of it. But it's a particular way of funding cultural output and the audiovisual sector. If RT is gone, how will these things be done? Well, they'll be done through tax expenditures, through things like the film tax credit, where we will have no control over them, or less control over them, and where employment is characterised by huge levels of insecurity. And it's debatable whether it's actually building up an industry of scale over the long term. Now, that's just one example, but there's lots of others. I'll give you another example, is the research and development tax credit. That is worth, I think, each year now, and it's going up every year, it's worth about 750 to 800 million euro a year. Now, there's a very serious, we all want to put money into research and development. Obviously, it's critically important. Question is the particular structure of that credit the best way to finance and fund the sort of research and development that will be actually beneficial for our society? Is it benefiting the small and medium enterprises, or is it just benefiting the very big and already very profitable and wealthy IT companies, or, you know, the Googles and the Facebooks of this world? And in fact, I would argue it's the latter at the moment. And that in fact more money should be going in direct expenditure to our universities, to our education institutions, and to support small and medium enterprise that we think might be beneficial to our society, rather than just to super wealthy corporations. Right, so these things need to be examined. I mean, they're just two examples. You could go through the list. One that we probably should examine are tax breaks for forestry. We haven't looked at the detail, and I won't promise I know a load about it, but one thing we can say is we're not doing very well on our afforestation. We're talking about climate measures. We're not doing well. We've never hit our targets. We've got a forestry model that is over-focused on a type of forestry that is arguably damaging to the environment, not very good for climate, and indeed not very good for local communities. So, have we examined in detail the tax credits for forestry to look at, are these actually the best way to develop a sustainable model of forestry to the benefit of our society and local communities, as against maybe doing it in a different way? Right, so these things need to be seriously examined on an ongoing basis, and I think that's, to me, one of the most important recommendations we have to look at, and they need to be in full sight and in full view when we're looking at budgets. So, because otherwise about 20 to 30 billion, maybe more each year, of expenditure of public money in the form of tax expenditures is not being properly scrutinised, and maybe just handy money for certain sectors, and nobody wants to call any attention to it. Anyway, I've gone on too long. That's just one example. So this is important stuff to discuss, and these reports, I think, are at least helping to kickstart a discussion on these important issues.